What you are about to discover has nothing to do with willpower, ignoring what you feel, or pretending everything is fine when it's not. Nor is it about forcing a positive attitude or fighting every negative thought that enters your mind. The real key to ensuring that nothing and no one ever affects you again lies in something much deeper, something most people ignore because they prefer to seek solutions externally, without realizing that the only real change happens from within. Have you ever wondered why some people, no matter what happens, seem to move through life with unshakable calm? They go through crises, losses, or moments of uncertainty and yet remain centered. Meanwhile, others, even in everyday situations, seem on the verge of collapse, trapped in their own emotions and reactions. Is it a matter of luck, personality? Or is there a hidden principle that separates those who master their inner world from those who are enslaved by it? This is where most people go wrong. They believe that reality is objective, that things just happen, and that what they feel is an inevitable consequence of external events. But this is not true. Everything you experience, absolutely everything, is filtered through the way you interpret life, through the beliefs you have carried with you for as long as you can remember, through the emotions you never learned to manage. It's as if you were wearing glasses tinted with a specific color. No matter what stands before you, you will always see everything through that filter. And if that filter is distorted by fear, resentment, or guilt, then the world will reflect exactly that, not because life is unfair, but because you cannot see beyond what you carry inside you. But here's the key no one ever told you. It's not about avoiding pain or running away from difficult emotions. It's not about being immune to everything that happens around you. It's about transforming the meaning you give to each experience, reprogramming the way you perceive reality, and learning to turn every emotion into a tool for growth rather than a weight that keeps you stuck. Because the truth is, reality is not imposed, it is interpreted. And when you understand this, when you learn to take control of that interpretation, you realize that you can choose how you respond to any situation. At that moment, you become free. Today, we will explore exactly how to do that. Not with abstract theories, but with principles used by those who have achieved an inner peace that depends on nothing and no one. You will discover how to transform fear into clarity, how to make negative emotions work for you rather than against you, and how to reach a state of unshakable serenity, no matter what happens in your life. What you are about to understand can change everything, but only if you are willing to look within yourself and question everything you have taken for granted until now. Because in the end, it is not what happens that determines your peace. It is how you choose to experience it. And once you learn how to transform this process, you will realize that nothing and no one will ever affect you the same way again. How would your life be if you could remove these invisible glasses that distort what you see and experience the world without the weight of your fears, limiting beliefs, and repressed emotions? This freedom is not a distant dream, nor a state reserved for a few enlightened ones. It is your birthright, a capacity that has always been dormant within you, waiting to be awakened. The human mind is a fascinating labyrinth, a space where every thought, reaction, and emotion is shaped by deep layers that we rarely explore consciously. From the moment we are born, we begin accumulating experiences that form the filters through which we see the world. These filters are not random. They are the result of everything we have lived, learned, and, most importantly, interpreted throughout our existence. Think for a moment about how two people can go through the exact same situation and have completely different experiences. Faced with criticism, one person might feel devastated, while another sees it as an opportunity for growth. When confronted with sudden change, one might drown in anxiety, while another embraces it as the beginning of an adventure. The difference is not in what happens, but in how each person perceives it. This idea is not new. Since ancient times, wise people have understood that our perception creates our reality. One of the thinkers who best articulated this concept was Carl Jung, who described the human psyche as a vast territory where most of it remains submerged in the unconscious. According to this view, what we do not bring into consciousness governs us from the shadows, shaping how we respond to the world without us even realizing it. Our perceptions act as invisible lenses that color everything we see. If you grew up believing that the world is a hostile place, you will find proof of that hostility everywhere you look. If you carry the belief that you are unworthy of love, you will interpret even the kindest gestures with suspicion or doubt. These lenses not only color what you see, but also determine what you are capable of seeing and what remains invisible to you. The greatest trap is that we mistake these filters for reality itself. We forget that we are seeing an interpreted version of the world and start believing that this is simply how things are. This person doesn't appreciate me becomes an absolute truth when, in reality, it is just an interpretation based on our own insecurities. This obstacle is impossible to overcome turns into a definitive sentence when, in truth, it is only fear speaking through us. Here we find the first key to our liberation: awareness. When you begin to realize that what you see is not objective reality, but your interpretation of it, something magical happens. Suddenly, you have options. You can question that initial automatic reaction and ask yourself, is this the only way to see this situation? What other interpretations might be possible? The difference between reacting and responding lies precisely in this space of awareness. When we react, we are slaves to our automatic patterns, driven by the autopilot of our unconscious mind. When we respond, we create a moment of pause, a space where conscious choice becomes possible. This space of awareness is what great spiritual masters have called presence, the ability to be fully in the now, observing your own thoughts and emotions without completely identifying with them. It's as if a part of you could step back and watch what's happening inside without being swept away by the current. The good news is that this ability is not a gift reserved for a few. It's a skill that anyone can cultivate with practice and attention. Start simply by noticing your reactions. When something affects you, pause for a moment and observe what is happening inside you. What thoughts arise? What sensations appear in your body? What emotions are awakened? Not to judge or change them, but simply to become aware of them. Over time, you will notice that this simple act of observation begins to transform your relationship with your own experiences. What once immediately pulled you into turbulence can now be observed with greater calm. What once seemed like an unquestionable truth now reveals itself as just one of many possible ways to interpret what is happening. And so, step by step, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop being a leaf at the mercy of external circumstances and become a tree with deep roots, capable of standing firm even in the midst of a storm. Not because you control what happens around you, but because you have learned to control how you perceive and respond to it. If this resonates with you, I'd love for you to share your experience. Write in the comments, "Nothing disturbs my peace," and share a moment when you managed to see a difficult situation from a new perspective. Your testimony might be exactly what someone needs to read today to begin their own journey of transformation. Our emotional reactions are like rivers flowing from deep, ancient sources. To understand why we react the way we do, we need to explore the origins of these emotional currents that so often sweep us away before we can resist. From the moment we arrive in this world, we begin creating emotional maps based on our experiences. A child who receives unconditional love develops a map where the world feels safe and welcoming. Another, who faces rejection or inconsistency, may create a map where distrust and constant vigilance are necessary for survival. These initial maps are not chosen consciously. They form as adaptive responses to our environment. Over time, these patterns deepen and become automatic. Every new experience tends to be interpreted through the filter of past experiences. If vulnerability once brought pain, your emotional system will learn to protect you by activating defense mechanisms whenever a situation even remotely resembles that past experience. It is not a conscious choice, but an instinctive response designed to keep you safe. Here we find what the psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow, those parts of ourselves that we repress, deny, or hide because at some point they seem too painful or unacceptable to face. The fascinating thing about the shadow is that, even though we try to keep it hidden, it always finds ways to manifest in our lives, especially when something or someone touches those unhealed wounds. That's why certain words or actions from others can affect us so deeply. When someone says something that resonates with an insecurity we carry, we are not just reacting to what was said in the present, but to an entire emotional history that is being triggered at that moment. It's as if those words struck a chord that vibrates with all the similar experiences we've had before. Think about it. Why can a casual comment about your work trigger an emotional storm in you, while the same remark barely affects someone else. It's not the comment itself, but what it stirs within you. Perhaps it activates a deep fear of not being good enough or revives memories of times when you felt unfairly judged. Our most intense emotions are often signals pointing to aspects of ourselves that are asking to be acknowledged and healed. Disproportionate anger may indicate boundaries that have been repeatedly crossed. Paralyzing fear can reveal limiting beliefs about our ability to face challenges. Deep sadness can show attachments or expectations that need to be released. Instead of seeing these emotions as enemies to be fought or weaknesses to be overcome, we can begin to treat them as messengers bringing valuable information about our inner world. When an intense emotion arises, rather than suppressing it or being swept away by it, you can pause and ask yourself, what is this emotion showing me about myself? What unmet need is it expressing? What old belief is it activating? This compassionate curiosity toward your emotions is the first step to emotional freedom, because what we consciously recognize begins to lose its unconscious power over us. What we bring to light can no longer operate in the shadows. It's important to understand that this process is not about blaming ourselves for our emotional reactions. We didn't consciously choose the patterns we developed in childhood or the wounds we accumulated throughout life, but we can choose now how we relate to these parts of ourselves. Every time someone or something deeply affects you, you can see it as an invitation to learn more about yourself. Instead of focusing all your attention on the external trigger, you can turn your gaze inward and ask, what part of me is being activated right now? This simple question completely changes your relationship with the experience, transforming it from an external threat into an opportunity for self-knowledge. Here lies a liberating truth. When you understand that your emotional reactions are not just responses to what happens outside but expressions of your inner world, you begin to reclaim the power you had given to circumstances. You stop being a victim of what others say or do and become an explorer of your own emotional landscape, increasingly capable of navigating its currents with wisdom and grace. Deep within your being, there is a dimension of awareness that remains unchanged even in the most intense emotional storms. It's like the ocean floor that stays still while the waves rage on the surface. This inner presence, this silent witness to your experiences, is what we might call the inner observer, and it is the master key to your emotional freedom. Many spiritual masters throughout history have spoken of this ability for detached observation as the essence of our deepest nature. Jung referred to it as the self, the center of the psyche, which both transcends and integrates all aspects of our personality. It is this part of us that can observe our thoughts and emotions without fully identifying with them. When you learn to access this inner observer, something extraordinary begins to happen. You are no longer just your anger, your fear, or your sadness. You are also the one who observes these emotions. This subtle yet profound shift in perspective creates a space between stimulus and response, a space where your true power resides. Imagine for a moment that you are in a difficult situation. Someone has unfairly criticized you in a meeting. You feel the anger rising through your body, your heart beating faster, your thoughts racing. The habitual reaction would be to get carried away by this current of anger, responding from that altered state. But now, with the practice of the inner observer, you have another option. You can step back internally and notice, I am experiencing anger right now. I can feel the heat in my face, the tension in my hands, the defensive thoughts arising in my mind. You are not suppressing the emotion, nor are you being dominated by it. You are simply observing it with mindfulness. In this act of conscious observation, you are no longer completely identified with the emotion. There is a part of you that remains clear, centered, and capable of choosing your next step. That space between stimulus and response is where your freedom lies. The mystic and philosopher Viktor Frankl expressed this beautifully when he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Cultivating this ability for observation does not happen overnight. It is a practice, a spiritual muscle that strengthens with constant exercise. Start with simple moments. When you feel an emotion arise, instead of immediately identifying with it, try to name it. Here is fear. I am noticing frustration. Sadness is present now. This simple act of naming your emotions already creates a small distance, allowing you to relate to them differently. Another powerful practice is to pay attention to the physical sensations that accompany your emotional states. Where do you feel the emotion in your body? Is it a tightness in your chest, tension in your jaw, a knot in your stomach? By bringing your attention to these bodily sensations, you naturally step into the role of the observer. You are not trying to change or control what you feel. You are simply witnessing it with gentle curiosity. Over time, you begin to realize that you can be with any emotion, no matter how intense, without losing your center. Even in the midst of fear, you can access an inner sense of calm. Even in sadness, you can connect with a quality of openness and compassion for the experience. The emotions still arise, you are human after all, but they no longer define you or dictate your actions. This state of conscious presence is not just a refuge in difficult times. It is also a foundation for wiser and more effective actions in the world. When you respond from the inner observer instead of reacting emotionally, your words and actions come from a deeper place. They are not merely automatic reactions conditioned by the past but authentic expressions of who you are in this moment. The inner observer also allows you to see beyond your own filters and biases. When someone says something that would normally offend you, you can notice the reaction arising within you, but you can also see beyond it. Perhaps you recognize the fear or pain behind the other person's words. Perhaps you understand that their behavior, like yours, is conditioned by their own experiences and wounds. This understanding does not mean tolerating harmful behaviors, but rather responding to them with clarity instead of reactivity. The constant practice of the inner observer gradually leads you to a state of inner freedom, where, although emotional storms may still arise, you are no longer the storm, you are the vast sky that holds it. Emotions come and go like passing clouds, but your deepest essence remains spacious and serene, like the blue sky beyond all clouds. And from this space of inner clarity, you realize that nothing and no one has the power to disturb your essential peace anymore, because you have found an anchor in that which is beyond all disturbance. The emotions we call negative, fear, anger, sadness, shame, guilt, are often the ones we resist experiencing the most. From a young age, many of us learn that these emotions are problematic, that they must be controlled, overcome, or worse, suppressed. Don't cry, don't be afraid, don't get angry. These are phrases many of us heard frequently in childhood. Without realizing it, we developed a combative relationship with a natural and essential part of our human experience. What we didn't understand at the time, and what many still don't, is that these emotions are not our enemies. They are messengers, carriers of valuable information, and they serve essential evolutionary functions that have helped humanity survive and thrive for millennia. Fear warns us of potential dangers. Anger signals when our boundaries have been crossed. Sadness helps us process loss and let go of what no longer serves us. Every emotion, even the most uncomfortable ones, has its purpose and its inherent wisdom. The problem is not the emotions themselves, but our relationship with them. When we fight against what we feel, when we judge our emotions as good or bad, when we either fully identify with them or try to repress them, that's when suffering multiplies. As an old proverb says, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Difficult emotions are part of life, but the extra suffering we create around them is something we can learn to dissolve. So, how do we transform our relationship with these emotions? The first step is radical acceptance. This does not mean passive resignation or approving harmful situations. It means recognizing the reality of what is happening in your inner world at this moment, without fighting against it. It's like opening the door to a difficult visitor, not because you enjoy their company, but because you know that resisting their presence only gives them more power. When you feel an intense emotion, try this approach. Instead of trying to change it or get rid of it, give yourself permission to feel it fully. I am welcoming this fear. I am allowing it to be here. I am breathing with it. This attitude of openness and acceptance already begins to transform your experience of the emotion. It doesn't magically make it disappear, but it changes your relationship with it in a way that reduces its control over you. Another powerful practice is to find the message within the emotion. Every emotional state is trying to communicate something important to you. Fear may be pointing to a need for safety or preparation. Anger may be signaling that a deeply held value has been violated. A sadness may be helping you process a loss and create space for something new. When you learn to listen to these messages, difficult emotions become teachers rather than torments. Carl Jung expressed this idea profoundly when he said, "What we deny or repress does not disappear. It sinks into the unconscious, where it continues to affect us in ways we cannot control." On the other hand, when we bring these energies into the light of consciousness, we can integrate and transform them, turning what once seemed like a weakness into a source of strength and wisdom. Take fear, for example. Instead of seeing it as a sign of cowardice or weakness, you can learn to relate to it as an indicator that you are stepping out of your comfort zone, expanding into new possibilities. Instead of letting it paralyze you, you can acknowledge its message of caution and then ask yourself, what wise action can I take that honors this caution but doesn't leave me stuck? Anger, when experienced consciously, can transform from a destructive force into an energy of clarity and determination. Instead of acting impulsively from anger, you can feel it in your body, recognize its message about boundaries or injustices, and then channel that energy into a constructive action that addresses the root of the situation. Sadness, when allowed to flow without resistance, becomes a natural process of emotional cleansing and renewal. In a culture that often avoids this emotion, allowing yourself to fully feel your sadness can be a revolutionary act of self-care and authenticity. A practical technique for working with difficult emotions is what we might call emotional alchemy, the art of consciously transforming the energy of an emotion. Start by identifying and naming the emotion you're feeling. Then locate it and observe how it manifests physically and energetically. Next, breathe with that sensation, allowing your conscious breath to surround it and gradually open it up. Finally, ask yourself, what quality or inner resource do I need right now? Perhaps it's courage, compassion, clarity, or trust. By invoking this quality, you allow the energy of the difficult emotion to transmute into something that nourishes and strengthens you. This practice is not a method to quickly get rid of what you feel. It's a path to developing a wiser and more compassionate relationship with all of your emotional experience. Over time, you will discover that even the most intense and difficult emotions can be portals to greater presence, understanding, and inner freedom. Remember, it is not the emotions themselves that determine your well-being, but your relationship with them. When you stop fighting against your emotional experience and learn to embrace it with mindful attention, you discover that nothing you feel has the power to knock you down. Emotional waves will continue to arrive. It's a part of being human, but you will have learned to surf even the biggest ones with balance and grace. One of the strongest ties that keeps most people chained to the opinions and actions of others is the need for external validation. This need has deep roots in our social nature. As human beings, we evolved in communities where group acceptance was literally a matter of survival. Being rejected by the tribe could mean a death sentence in the early days of our species. Although today we no longer physically depend on the acceptance of others to survive, our brain hasn't fully updated this programming. The need for approval, to be seen, valued, and accepted by those around us, continues to be a fundamental drive that motivates much of our behavior, often without us realizing. Take a moment to observe how many of your daily decisions are influenced, even subtly, by what others might think. The clothes you choose, the opinions you express, the goals you pursue, even the way you behave when no one is watching. How many times have you refrained from expressing your truth out of fear of rejection? How many times have you tried to meet expectations that don't actually resonate with your most authentic essence? The price we pay for this dependence on external validation is immense. Each time we adjust our truth to fit in, each time we suppress parts of ourselves to be accepted, each time we allow the opinions of others to determine our worth, we are giving away our power. We are handing over the keys to our inner peace to external forces that can never give us the true satisfaction we seek. This abandonment of our authenticity in the name of social acceptance creates an internal tension that eventually seeks resolution, often through symptoms like anxiety, depression, or a vague but persistent sense that something is missing in our lives. It's as if we betray ourselves, sacrificing who we truly are on the altar of social approval. The liberation from this dependence begins with an honest recognition of how deeply rooted it is within us. It's not something we can simply decide to abandon overnight. It's a practice, a path of gradual return to our own inner authority. The first step on this path is to develop a more conscious relationship with your own values and truths. What truly matters to you, beyond what you've been told should matter? What makes you feel alive and aligned, regardless of receiving applause or external recognition? As you begin to clarify your own values, the next step is to practice internal validation. This means learning to recognize and celebrate your own efforts, qualities, and accomplishments without relying on others to notice or approve them. It's about developing the habit of being your own compassionate witness, your own encourager, your own source of approval. Setting healthy boundaries is another essential part of this process. As you become more aware of your need for external validation, you may begin to notice when you're willing to compromise your well-being or values to get it. In those moments, the practice of setting clear boundaries, saying no when you mean no, expressing your needs clearly, stepping away from relationships that constantly undermine your sense of value, becomes a powerful statement of self-esteem. Remember, freeing yourself from the need for external validation does not mean you stop caring about what others think or feel. It's not about isolating yourself or becoming indifferent to human connection. On the contrary, when you no longer depend on the approval of others to feel complete and valuable, you can relate to them from a place of authenticity and genuine generosity. Your connections become more real, deeper, and more fulfilling. The true power of this liberation is that when you stop giving your peace away to the mutable opinions of others, you discover an inexhaustible source of stability within yourself. Criticism may come, rejection may happen, people may not understand your choices, but none of that has the power to destabilize your center anymore. You've found an anchor in something much more constant than external approval, your own inner truth. True transformation does not happen in a moment of sudden inspiration, but through constant and conscious practice. Just as a muscle strengthens with regular exercise, our emotional immunity, the ability to maintain our center regardless of what happens around us, develops through daily practices that gradually reconfigure the way we relate to life. The dawn of each day offers a perfect opportunity to set the tone for your experience. Spend a few minutes before diving into the whirlwind of activities and responsibilities to connect with your center. It doesn't require elaborate meditation or a complex ritual. Just sit in silence, breathe consciously, and ask yourself, who do I want to be today? How do I want to relate to what life brings me? This conscious intention set at the beginning of the day acts as an anchor that helps you return to your center when emotional currents threaten to drag you away. Throughout the day, practice what we could call micro-moments of presence. Brief but powerful pauses where you turn off the autopilot and return to full awareness of the present moment. Use everyday activities as triggers for these moments. Each time you grab a glass of water, each time you walk through a door, each time your phone rings. In that instant, take a conscious breath, feel your feet on the ground, and reconnect with your center. These repeated micro-moments gradually build a state of presence that becomes more accessible in moments of challenge. When you find yourself in situations that typically destabilize you, practice what the ancient Stoics called negative visualization. It's not about cultivating pessimism, but preparing mentally for possible challenges. Before a difficult meeting or a tense conversation, take a moment to visualize what it would be like to maintain your center, even if things don't go as expected. Imagine the feeling of staying grounded in your inherent value, regardless of how others perceive or respond to you. At the end of the day, take a few minutes for a reflective practice. Review the moments when you maintained your center and those when you were swept away by automatic reactions. Do this without judgment, with the compassionate curiosity of someone observing to learn, not to criticize. Ask yourself, what does this teach me? What could I do differently tomorrow? This honest reflection, kept over time, greatly accelerates your growth. Remember, the goal is not perfection. It's not about never feeling fear, anger, or pain. It's about developing an increasingly conscious and compassionate relationship with all of your experience, including the difficult parts. Each time you regain your center after losing it, you strengthen your ability to do so more quickly next time. Each time you choose to respond consciously instead of reacting automatically, you are reclaiming your power. Like all valuable practices, building emotional immunity requires patience and perseverance. There will be days when you feel completely centered and others when it seems you've reverted to old patterns. This is also part of the journey. What matters is not the perfection of the process, but the commitment to it. With each day of consistent practice, you are building new neural pathways, new habits of perception and response that gradually replace old reactive patterns. You are literally reconfiguring the way your brain and your entire being process experience. And one day, perhaps without realizing exactly when the shift happened, you will discover that what once destabilized you now hardly causes a ripple on the surface of your inner peace. Together, we have walked a path of discovery, exploring the internal scenarios that determine how we experience the world, from understanding how our perceptions filter reality to recognizing the origin of our emotional reactions. From cultivating the inner observer to transforming our relationship with difficult emotions, from liberating ourselves from the need for external validation to establishing daily practices that strengthen our emotional immunity. Each step of this journey has brought us closer to that inner freedom, which doesn't depend on external circumstances but arises from a new relationship with our own experience. True freedom, as we discovered, is not about controlling what happens around us. It is not about avoiding difficult situations or challenging people. It is not about suppressing uncomfortable emotions or maintaining false positivity. True inner freedom is much deeper and more revolutionary. It is the ability to be fully present with everything that arises, without anything having the power to steal your essential peace. This freedom is available to you in this very moment. It is not something you need to search for in the future or in some elevated spiritual state. It is here in the simple, yet profound, ability to witness your experience without being swept away by it. It is in each conscious breath you take, in every moment you choose to respond with wisdom instead of reacting out of habit, in every instant you return to your center after drifting away from it. The world will continue to be what it is. People will continue to act according to their own patterns and limitations. Challenges will continue to arise in your path. The difference is that now you know that none of this needs to determine your inner state. You have discovered the secret that great sages and spiritual masters have pointed to throughout history. Peace is not something we find outside of ourselves, but a quality inherent in our deepest nature, which we can access at any time, regardless of the circumstances. Remember, this path is not linear. There will be days when you feel completely centered, able to navigate even the most challenging situations with grace and clarity, and others when you feel dragged by old patterns, stuck in reactions you thought you had overcome. This is also part of the journey. What matters is not perfection, but the conscious return again and again to your center, your truth, your ability to choose how you want to relate to life. As Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This work of making the unconscious conscious, of illuminating the dark corners of our being with the light of loving attention, is perhaps the most important task we can undertake in this life. Because when we reclaim our inner power, when we stop being automatic reactors and become conscious creators of our experience, everything changes. Not just our own life, but the way we relate to others and to the world. Imagine for a moment a world where more and more people discover this truth, where more human beings free themselves from the unconscious patterns that generate so much unnecessary suffering. Imagine the possibilities that would open up for our species if each of us took responsibility for our own inner world, instead of projecting our fears, needs, and wounds onto others. This is the true work of transformation, not just personal but collective. And it begins here, now, with your conscious decision to reclaim your power, to inhabit your center, to cultivate a wiser and more compassionate relationship with all your experience. The invitation is open. The moment is now. The capacity has always been within you. Are you willing to reclaim this freedom that is your birthright? Are you willing to discover, step by step, what it truly means that nothing and no one can ever affect you again? The path is before you, and although no one can walk it for you, remember you are not alone. Millions of human beings throughout history have walked this same path of awakening. Their footsteps are there to guide you, their teachings to inspire you, their example to remind you that this liberation is possible. All that is required is your commitment, your attention, and your willingness to see the truth of who you truly are, beyond all the limitations you've believed up until now. Since you are still here, subscribe so we can see each other again.